Hi everyone, welcome to Style3D channel. In this video, I'll explain the two tools, Select/Move and Edit Pattern. These are the two tools that we use most frequently during our work with the software, and they are integral to the entire modeling process. Now, let's officially begin the explanation. As you can see, when we hover the mouse over the Select/Move tool for about 1 second, a brief description of the tool and its shortcut key will appear. After selecting the tool, let's first demonstrate the left-click function of the Select/Move tool. First, let's talk about Select. When we need to select a pattern, we can simply left-click to select it. If we need to select multiple patterns, we can hold down the Shift key and click repeatedly to select multiple patterns. In addition to clicking, we can also select the pattern by dragging a selection box. When using the selection box, it's important to note the direction of selection. When we select from right to left, as long as the dashed box covers part of the pattern, it will be selected. However, when selecting from left to right, if we don't select a complete edge of the pattern, it will not be selected. Therefore, when you need to select a pattern, it's better to drag the selection box from right to left. Next, let's talk about Move. Moving a pattern is similar to the method we explained earlier for moving in the 2D and 3D windows. Once a pattern is selected, hold down the left mouse button and drag to move the pattern. Now, that's the explanation for the Select/Move tool using the left mouse button. Next, let's explain the function of the Select/Move tool with the right mouse button. When a pattern is selected, right-click, and you will see a series of functions pop up. The first function is Symmetric Pattern with Seam. You can see its explanation here. It generates a symmetric pattern and also links the sewing lines to the symmetric positions when sewing. The shortcut key is Ctrl+D. The second function is Symmetric Pattern. You can see the difference from the previous one. This option does not include the sewing lines. It simply generates a symmetric pattern without adding sewing lines. Let's now demonstrate these two functions using two sleeves as an example. For this sleeve, we'll use Symmetric Pattern with Seam, while for the other sleeve, we'll use Symmetric Pattern. You can clearly see in the 3D window. For the cloned symmetric pattern with sewing lines, the sewing line connects in the middle, while the pattern cloned without sewing lines does not have the connection. When we open the sewing editor, we can also clearly see the difference in the sewing lines. Further down, there is Instance Pattern, which generates linked patterns, meaning both patterns will change simultaneously. After the patterns are generated, a line will appear connecting the center of the two patterns. You can notice the color difference in the connecting lines between the symmetric patterns and the instance patterns. This helps us distinguish the state of the patterns. Similarly, the instance patterns, only the pattern itself is linked, but the sewing lines are not. In the 3D window, the pattern's position will follow the changes in the 2D window. Next, we have the option to remove linked editing, which will break the link between the patterns. After clicking this, the connecting line between the patterns will disappear. Moving on, we have Create Lining. When you open this option, you'll see choices for Create Lining Inside, Create Lining Outside, as well as Generate Filling Pattern Inside and Outside. Let's first check the effect of Create Lining Inside. After clicking it, a linked pattern with a green connecting line will be generated. In the 3D window, we can clearly see that a lining layer has been generated inside the original pattern. Now, let's create lining outside to observe the effect. You can see that a layer of pattern is generated on the outer side of the original pattern. Next, we have Generate Filling Pattern, which also has inside and outside options. The Generate Filling pattern is similar to the inner lining, but it also includes a filler adjustment option in the Properties bar. This is typically used for down jackets. So, if you need to create a down jacket, you can use this feature to generate filling pattern and adjust the filling accordingly. Next is create internal shape by outline, which creates an internal shape based on the pattern's outline. Let me draw a larger rectangle for demonstration. Right-click on it and select Clone as internal shape, then move the mouse into the rectangle's pattern area. The sleeve pattern is now cloned inside the rectangle. Right-clicking on it will allow you to cut or convert it into a hole, among other operations. Then we have Create Internal Shape by Outline Sew, which uses the sleeve pattern as an example again. In the 3D window, you can clearly see the sewing line connection between the sleeve and the rectangular panel. Right-clicking on it also allows you to perform operations such as cut and convert it into a hole. Next is Clone as Reference Line, which copies the clean edge as a reference line. After clicking this, when you adjust the pattern, the reference line will stay in place. When you drag the pattern, the reference line will have an adsorption function, helping us make modifications. Next is Delete Reference Line. After clicking this option, when you use the Edit Pattern tool, you will notice that there is no longer a reference line beneath the edge as it was before. Next, we have Deactivate, Pattern and Sewing, and Deactivate Pattern. Let's demonstrate Deactivate, Pattern and Sewing, using the sleeve pattern. After clicking, in the 3D window, you'll see that the color of the sleeve changes from gray to a semi-transparent light purple. Clicking on Simulate will show that it is no longer involved in the simulation since the sewing lines are also deactivated. The armhole will no longer be connected. When we use the Deactivate Pattern function, the pattern will also enter the same state. However, if you open the simulation, you'll see that the armhole is tightly connected, unlike the deactivated sewing lines from earlier. If a pattern is already deactivated and you want to continue using it, you can right-click on the pattern and select Activate, which will cancel the deactivation effect. It will then become a pattern that can be simulated and moved again. Next, we have Freeze. Once a pattern is frozen, it becomes resistant to deformation during simulation. After applying this, the pattern will turn light blue. During simulation, it also cannot be moved. But unlike deactivation, a frozen pattern can still collide with other patterns. For example, if we move the body pattern close to it, a collision will occur. Similarly, you can right-click on the pattern to unfreeze it. Next is Strengthen. Clicking Apply, we rotate to a front view and compare the two sleeves. You'll see that the sleeve with Strengthen applied has turned yellow and is relatively stiff, while the other sleeve remains soft. You can also right-click on the pattern to unstrengthen it. Next, let's create a shape for the sleeve and apply Solidify. After opening the simulation, you'll see that the shape of the sleeve is fixed during the simulation. This means that it won't deform as easily when manipulated. On the other hand, the sleeve without Solidify changes shape more easily. So, when you need to stabilize the shape, you can use Solidify. You can also right-click on the pattern to unsolidify. Of course, these functions can also be applied and adjusted in the property editor on the right side. For Strengthen and Solidify, you can adjust the intensity after selecting them. Moving on, we have Offset Pattern Outline, which allows you to move the pattern's edge by a certain distance. This operation can expand or shrink the pattern. After clicking this, you'll see the changes in the 2D window. You can choose to extend or retract the edge. Extending means moving it outward, while retracting means moving it inward. The numerical values can be manually entered or adjusted by the up/down arrows. You can also adjust the number of offsets in the same way. By checking Create Internal Line, a reference line will be generated at the original position to help us understand the modification values. You can also choose the side segment type. Switching to Retract, the pattern will move inward, and you can adjust its values as well. Next is Add Internal Isoline. While Offset Pattern Outline adjusts the entire pattern, Add Internal Isoline generates line segments based on the edge without affecting the original pattern's shape. The space can also be manually entered, or you can adjust the numerical value by pressing the up and down keys. The expansion count is the same. The generation direction can also be switched. The default direction is generally inward, but you can also set it to the backward direction or double side. Next is Use Extend. When we have an open shape, we can use the extension function to align it to the net edge of the pattern piece. Next is Add as a measurement line. Here, we use the pen tool to give a simple demonstration. Draw several line segments on the pattern piece, and click each one individually to add them as measurement lines. Then, you will see the floating toolbar above the 2D window. Find Length, click to expand, and select Size Measurement. You can see that the lengths measured for the line segments are all displayed and recorded here. Next is Select Patterns with same specified property, particle distance, layer, and fabric. Let's first select by particle distance. This way, you can see that the 4 pattern pieces of the garment body are selected, while the collar is not selected. In the property editor on the right, you can see that the garment body's particle distance is 20, while the collar's particle distance is 10, so the collar is not selected. Similarly, when we select pattern pieces with the same layer property, you can see that all pattern pieces are selected, because their layer is 0. Next, when we select pattern pieces with the same fabric, you can see that all the fabrics are using this blue fabric, so after clicking, all the pattern pieces using that fabric will be selected. Next is Create New Fabric. After clicking, you can see that a new fabric is generated based on the current fabric. After clicking the fabric, the edge of the pattern piece in the 2D window will be highlighted in red to indicate that this pattern piece is using that fabric. Next is Replace Pattern from DXF, which updates the shape of the pattern piece based on the modified DXF file. Generally, this can be used when interfacing with pattern-making software. When using Replace Pattern from DXF, ensure that the number of vertices on the pattern's seam line and the pattern name prefix in the DXF file match the pattern being replaced. Next is Apply the Pattern to. Similar to the previous feature, it's necessary to ensure that the number of vertices on the pattern's seam line matches the pattern being replaced. Using this sleeve piece as a demonstration, apply it to the original pattern piece, and you can see that the shape of the original pattern piece is replaced with the shape of the new sleeve piece. Here, rearrange the position of the pattern piece again. We can also open the Edit Sewing function to observe the sewing relationships. You can see that the original sewing lines have been preserved, so there is no need to perform secondary sewing edits. Click Simulate to see the effect. Next is Attach To, which allows you to attach the selected pattern to another pattern. Let's use a small rectangle for demonstration. Right-click and select Attach To. Then click on the target pattern. You'll see that the pattern has been successfully attached. Changing its color makes it easier to see the attachment state. Next is Focus Zoom. After clicking, it will focus on the selected point in the 2D window. The selected point will become the center axis for alignment. If you want to switch back to the panoramic view, right-click and select Focus Panorama. This will display all patterns in the 2D window. Next is Group, which allows you to add patterns to a group. Select the body pattern. Right-click and choose Add Group. Now, when you click on an ungrouped pattern, only that pattern will be highlighted. But when you hover over the grouped patterns, they will show in blue. If you select one pattern within a group, the others will also be selected. If you no longer want to group them, you can right-click and unlink group. Next is the Align tool. Select the patterns with the selection box, then use the Alignment tool to align them to the top, bottom, or center, and so on. After clicking, all the selected patterns will align to the top. Next is Order, which allows you to move patterns forward or backward in the stack. Let's demonstrate this with the sleeve pattern, which is currently positioned above the body pattern. If you want to move the sleeve back, right-click and select Order to adjust its position. We will place it at the bottom, so in the 2D window, the sleeve is now positioned beneath the body pattern. Next is Lock, which prevents the pattern from being selected in the 2D window. You'll notice that patterns that are not locked can be selected, but locked patterns cannot be selected or adjusted. If you need to unlock them to select or adjust, right-click in a blank area and select Unlock All Patterns. The patterns will be unlocked and can be edited again. Next is Flip/Rotate, which includes options for horizontal/vertical flipping, clockwise/counterclockwise rotation, or rotating along the X or Y axis. Let's demonstrate horizontal flip. After clicking Flip, you'll see the pattern flipped in both the 2D and 3D windows. You can click again to flip it back. Now, let's demonstrate 90-degree clockwise rotation. After clicking, the pattern in the 2D window will rotate, but there will be no change in the 3D window. Let's also try 90-degree counterclockwise rotation to rotate it back. Next, let's demonstrate parallel to X-axis. After applying this, select an edge to align it parallel to the X-axis. When you select the bottom edge, it will rotate slightly. Next is Hide 3D Pattern, which allows you to hide the selected pattern in the 3D window. You can use the shortcut Shift+Q to toggle the visibility. After clicking, you'll see the sleeve pattern is hidden in the 3D window. To make it visible again, press Shift+Q, and the pattern will reappear. Next is Hide All 3D Patterns, which hides all patterns in the 3D window. The shortcut for this is Shift+C. After clicking, all patterns in the 3D window will be hidden. Pressing Shift+C again will display them all. Next is the Copy and Paste. The corresponding shortcut keys are also displayed. Click Copy on a pattern. Then click Paste, and the pattern will be copied and pasted. If you want to copy and paste multiple patterns, select several patterns and perform the same operation. You'll see that the pasted patterns in the 3D window will follow the position in the 2D window. And there will be no connecting lines between the two patterns, indicating that there's no linked relationship between the pasted pattern and the original one. Next, let's try Mirror Paste. This works similarly, creating a mirrored version of the pattern without any linked relationship. Finally, we have Delete, which deletes the selected pattern. After clicking Delete, the pattern will be removed. So, that concludes the introduction to the Select/Move tool in the 2D window. Next, we will introduce the Select/Move tool and its application in the 3D window. First, it is about move. In the non-simulation case, holding down the left mouse button and dragging can move the pattern piece. In the simulation case, holding down the left mouse button and dragging simulates a hand-pulling effect to adjust the state. Similarly, in the non-simulation case, you can also select a pattern piece and then use the positioning ball to move and rotate it. Next, let's look at the right-click operations. The first right-click option is Invert Selection. After clicking, it performs an invert selection to select the remaining unselected pattern pieces. The second option is Reset 2D Arrangement Selected. This will flatten the selected pattern piece to be consistent with the state of the 2D window. After selecting, look at the position of this pattern piece in the 2D window. It is roughly at the avatar's shoulder. The position in the 3D window is basically the same. Next is Reset 3D Arrangement Selected. This can expand the pattern piece in 3D to the arranged position. Because this pattern piece has not been arranged yet, first perform an arrangement here. Hold down the shortcut key A to call up the avatar's arrangement points. Arrange the pattern piece to the front, and then simulate. After the simulation, with the avatar dressed properly, try resetting the 3D arrangement position again. And you will see it is consistent with the position we just arranged. Continuing further down are a series of operations such as deactivate that are the same as in the 2D window. These will not be introduced here. However, unlike the 2D window, there is a function to add pin on selected point. By clicking it, you can see that a fixed pin is automatically added to the pattern piece. Then further down is Flip Orientationally 3D. It can flip the front and back of the pattern piece. If the pattern piece is mistakenly reversed, you can use it. After clicking, you can see that the 3D pattern piece has been flipped. The selected position of the pattern piece and the direction in the 2D window are reversed. Clicking again will flip it back, and you will see that the states are consistent. Next further down is Smartly Convert to. After clicking it open, you can choose to convert to trim, button, top stitch, avatar, etc. That is, you can convert the pattern piece into files of these types. It should be noted that the conversion of the pattern piece here is one way. After we convert a pattern piece into a trim, prop, or avatar file, it cannot be converted back to a pattern piece. Therefore, when using the Smart Convert to tool, you need to be cautious. Further down are Create New Fabric and Attach to, which are the same operations. Next further down is Move to, which can move to the over, under, or avatar, etc. Here is a demonstration. Use the rectangle tool to draw a square on the pattern piece, then right-click to clone as pattern. Then, use the sewing tool to give it a sewing relationship. Then, use Move to Over. You can see that the pattern piece now moves according to the sewing line relationship. Then click Simulate, and it will be simulated very conveniently and quickly. Further down are functions for Focus Zoom and Focus Panorama, which are similar to those in the 2D window. Then further down are Hide Patterns in 3D window, Hide All Patterns, and Hide All Avatars. The first two functions are the same, with the addition of the Hide All Avatars operation. You can see that after clicking Hide All Avatars, the avatar in the 3D window and the avatar silhouette in the 2D window disappear. Also, in the 3D window, right-click and select Show All Avatars, and the avatar will be displayed again. Then, continuing further down, are the same Flip Horizontally 3D and Flip Vertically 3D operations as in the 2D window, as well as Copy, Paste, and Mirror Paste operations. This concludes the explanation of the Select/Move tool. Next, we explain the Edit Pattern tool. When you hover over the Edit Pattern tool, you can see its description: modify patterns by moving points and segments, shortcut key, Z. Now, let's first introduce the operation of selecting and moving points. When you select a point with the left mouse button, because the pattern piece has a symmetry axis in the middle, the point on the other side will also be selected. Using the left mouse button to select and drag, you can move the point. If you need to select multiple points for editing, you can hold down Shift to select consecutively and then drag, or perform a box selection from left to right. Next, let's look at the right-click functions in the Edit Pattern tool. The first right-click option is Add Notch. After clicking, a notch will be added at that point. Then further down is Convert to Curve Point. You can select an edge endpoint and convert it into a curve control point. Continuing further down is Create Guideline, which can be parallel to X-axis, parallel to Y-axis, tangent, or vertical. After creating, you can select the guideline and drag it. If you do not want it to be dragged, you can right-click to lock it. If you no longer want the guideline, you can select it and press the Delete key to remove it, or right-click to delete all guidelines. This concludes the explanation of the Edit Pattern tool's application for points. Next, we explain the operations for selecting and moving lines. First, we can select an edge, either by clicking, holding Shift to click, or by box selection. It is important to note that box selecting from right to left and from left to right are not the same. When we box select starting from the left, the edge endpoints will be selected. But when box selecting from the right, the entire line segment will be selected. Therefore, when we need to select points, we can box select from left to right. When we need to select lines, we can box select from right to left. To move them, hold down the left mouse button and drag to move the edge's position. Then, let's explain some of the right-click operations and their applications. Select a single line segment, then right-click. First, you can split the line. After clicking, a dialog box will pop up, supporting split into two lines, or uniform split. The 2D window will show clear color indicators: line 1 is yellow and line 2 is blue. So you can set by length or perform uniform split. When choosing uniform split, the number indicates into how many lines you want to divide it. Click OK, and the line segment is divided. Next is Add Point to Intersection. Use the pen tool to draw two line segments. Then click at the intersection to generate a point. You can see that a point is generated at the intersection of the two line segments. Then further down is Offset Pattern Outline. It works the same as when using the Select/Move tool, allowing you to extend/retract the edge, but the difference here is that it modifies only the selected edge, not the entire pattern piece. Next, further down is Change Length. Select an edge, click Change Length, and you can choose a specific length or an increment. Here we demonstrate both length and increment. If you enter a value in the length field, the line segment's length becomes that value. If you enter a value in the increment field, the line segment's length increases by that value from its original length. If a direction is required, you can also choose the direction for length/increment further down, supporting simultaneous increase on both sides, or increase at the tail end, or at the head end. Next, further down are tools such as Add as Measurement Line, which operate the same as before and will not be introduced further. Then is Add Internal Isoline, which, as in the Select/Move tool, is a similar operation and has some similarity to Offset Pattern Outline. Here, we demonstrate the extension effect of Add Internal Isoline. You can see the effects of Extend and Extend to Outline. Next, further down, is Create Guideline. We draw an oval to demonstrate. Click the edge to create a guideline. A straight line is generated by connecting the two endpoints of the line segment. Parallel to x-axis or parallel to y-axis means generating a guideline at the selected point that is parallel to the x or y-axis. Create Guideline, Tangent, is based on the tangent at the selected point, and Create Guideline, Vertical, is based on the perpendicular from the selected point to the edge. Similarly, after generating, you can select the guideline and drag it. If you do not want it to be dragged, you can right-click to lock it. If you no longer want the guidelines, you can right-click and choose to delete all guidelines. Next, further down is Lock function, which works the same as in the Select/Move tool. After locking, that edge becomes gray and cannot be selected. Similarly, right-click in an empty area to unlock all outlines. Then further down are the functions for Paste and Delete Edge, which are the same operations and will not be introduced in detail. This is the operation method of the Edit Pattern tool for the outer contour. You can also operate on the internal lines of the pattern piece. Select the internal line in the middle. To demonstrate, the first right-click option is Split. The second is Add Point to Intersection, which can generate a point at the intersection with other outlines or internal lines. After clicking, the line generates an intersection point and is segmented. Next, further down is Divide Internal Point, which can divide the internal graphic into multiple segments based on inflection points. After clicking, you can see it splits into two vertices. Select one of them. Because it has been split, you can move it and perform other operations. Then further down are Cut and Sew. Select the edge and click Cut, which cuts the pattern piece into two pieces. You can check its sewing relationship. For pattern pieces cut with the Cut tool, there is no sewing line connecting them. Now, look at the sewing relationship after using Cut and Sew. A sewing line connects the two pattern pieces. So, you can choose the appropriate tool according to your needs. Next, further down is Set as Symmetry Axis. The function of Set as Symmetry Axis is to use the selected edge as the axis of symmetry to generate the mirror image of the other half. Let's demonstrate it. First, move this part of the pattern piece aside a bit. Right-click on the edge and click Set as Symmetry Axis, and it unfolds along the center line, generating a pattern piece. Because it unfolds along the center line, that side needs to be simulated again. Continuing further down is Convert to Symmetry Axis, which can set the selected edge as the symmetry axis. Before setting, you need to delete this internal graphic to avoid failure, due to inconsistent shapes of the left and right pattern pieces. After deletion, click again, and it is set successfully. This way, the model adjustments on both sides will be unified. Continuing further down is Change Length, which also allows you to directly change the length or the increment. After entering -5, the length of this line changes. Add Internal Isoline is the same function and will not be repeated. Continuing further down is Duplicated as Mirrored Internal Line, which can generate a mirrored internal line. We use this line to demonstrate. Select the line, right-click, and click Duplicated as Mirrored Internal Line. Then, after selecting the symmetry axis, you can see that a mirrored internal line is generated along the symmetry axis. Next, further down is Convert to Baseline, which can convert an internal line into a baseline. After conversion, it becomes a purple line that cannot be selected. If you need to use this line, you can use the Trace tool to trace it back. Next, further down in the right-click menu is Extend/Trim, which can extend to the outline or to the nearest internal line. Click Extend to Outline, and you can see that the line extends until it aligns with the pattern piece's outer contour. If you use Extend to Nearest Internal Line, it will align the line with the nearest internal line. Then further down is Extend/Trim and Add Point to Outline or Extend and Add Point to Nearest Internal Line. Again, using this line to demonstrate, right-click and click Extend/Trim and Add Point to Outline. This shows that the extended line splits the outline, and a vertex is added at the extension alignment. Extend/Trim and Add Point to Nearest Internal Line works similarly, extending the line to the nearest internal line and adding a point on that internal line. Next is Select Internal Lines with the same properties. You can select internal lines with the same folding properties or the same elasticity. First, select internal lines with the same folding properties. You can see their properties in the property editor on the right. Then, for internal lines with the same elasticity, the operation is the same. Continuing further down is Create Guideline, which is operated the same as the previous guideline function. Then further is the Lock function. Clicking it will lock the guideline. After clicking Lock, that line cannot be selected, while those not locked can be selected. Similarly, right-click in an empty area to unlock all guidelines, so they can be selected again. Next, further down are the functions for Copy, Paste, Mirror Paste, and Delete Edge, which are the same operations and will not be introduced further. That's it, guys, and I hope some of the tips will help your modeling work. If you like what we do, please liking, commenting and sharing this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in next video. Goodbye.